You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with columnist for The Independent, James Rampton, and economics editor for The Spectator, Kate Andrews. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, The Telegraph reports on Tory plans to mandate a year of military or community service for young royals. The Guardian leads with a British ex-military chief calling Rishi Sunak's national service plan bonkers. The Mirror adds that a leaked document suggests those plans would fail to rule out jailing those who don't sign up. The Eye reveals Sir Keir Starmer's plan to bolster UK infrastructure with private finance. The Times highlights Labour's pledge to act swiftly on national security in order to gain public trust if they win the election. And a reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by James Rampton and Kate Andrews. Welcome to both of you. Let's start with the policy announcement of the hour. We've been speaking about this for the last couple of days now, and this is the Conservatives' their pledge to bringing compulsory national service for 18-year-olds. Take us into that, Kate.
So if the Tories wanted to grab headlines in the first days of the election, they have succeeded in doing that. It does feel as if their plans to bring back national service for 18-year-olds are going to run for some time as a main headline. Part of their problem, however, is that many people who you might expect to come out and support the Tories are not doing so, including Michael Portillo, a former Tory Defence Secretary, who said over the weekend that he was very much worried by this policy indeed. You have a former chief of the Naval Staff that The Guardian is also citing here, talking about a bonkers plan. It's very curious because it was only a few days ago that Keir Starmer said that he continued to support votes for 16-year-olds. That is the kind of policy that is actually going to rattle a lot of people. Even people who are frustrated with the Tories are going to think, gosh, I'm not so sure about that. That feels a bit radical. And the only way, perhaps, that you could go about convincing people that Keir Starmer had a point there, if they were already a bit nervous about it, is to say that in a few years' time, these people might be subject to compulsory national insurance or compulsory volunteering, which isn't even going to come with a salary. And it's such a curious way to kick off your campaign.
Well, if they go full-time, if it's full-time military national service, then that is paid.
There's talk about pay, which is going to potentially cost billions of pounds, which have not yet been accounted for by the Tory party. We'll wait to see the manifesto if it is costed. But you are going to have millions of people who are subject to doing work without pay. And it is just such a curious way to kick off a campaign, especially when you clearly have not gone out to seek the support of the names that might support this kind of policy, as The Guardian is highlighting on Monday.
They're quoting Lord Dannett, former Chief of the General Staff, saying the proposal was electoral opportunism. The cost of this would be considerable in terms of trainers and infrastructure. This task cannot just be imposed on the armed forces as an extra thing to do. Yeah,
exactly. And Lord West, former Chief of the Naval Staff, says we need to spend more on defence, but by doing what Sunak is suggesting, money will be sucked out of defence. To me, there's one phrase behind this policy, and it's Reform UK. It's a very right-wing, traditionalist policy that will appeal to the sort of people who might be tempted to flirt with Reform UK. And Sunak is sort of saying, to use a military analogy, get your tanks off our lawn.
Although Nigel Farage said today on Trevor Phillips on Sunday that it was unworkable.
Well, he might say that, but a lot of people who follow him will believe that. There's a generation of people who didn't fight in the war and who didn't even do national service, who believe that that's what young people need to toughen them up. And I do think that's a sort of dog whistle issue for a certain constituency that may well be leaning towards Reform UK. And I think it's very canny in that way. It also distracts from all the disasters that Sunak has suffered in the first week, you know, encouraging Welsh people to watch the Euros when Wales didn't even qualify, you know, appearing at the Titanic, experience in Northern Ireland. You know, you can insert your own jokes about sinking ships here. So I think in that sense, it's quite canny, but you're quite right, Kate. The fact that he didn't get any of these people on board. Michael Portillo, you remember, was once criticised for the ridiculous jingoism of a speech he gave to the Tory party conference where he said, the 3 letters that send shivers around the world at SAS. You know, he was the most gung-ho militaristic guy in those days. And he is saying, this worries me. It looks like it hasn't been fully thought through.
And Kate, in your estimation, this policy appealing to the more right-wing voters?
I think it could be. I think it's also appealing to older voters. This idea that, you know, the kids are not all right. What are we going to do about the youth? It's something that every generation thinks about. But I think especially post-COVID, and we'll come on to this later with the story about loneliness in the second half. I mean, there's a good reason that people are questioning, you know, what's going so wrong for the young. But for this to be the answer, I think is quite concerning. You had the Foreign Secretary James Cleverly talking about how, you know, we mandate people to do things all the time. For this to be the first policy really out the gate, connected to the far more authoritarian side of conservative values rather than those small L liberal ones, tells us a lot about what's gone on since COVID, especially within the Tory party. The Conservatives need an offer for young people. They need to be talking about housing. They need to be talking about the economy. To jump in with mandatory national service, again, for most people who would do this, it would not be paid. You know, that is remarkable when there's so many things young people are crying out for.
And James, in the Telegraph, as more details of their scheme comes to fruition, the suggestion that the royal family wouldn't be exempt, their children would be expected to take part.
Well, I absolutely applaud the Telegraph for managing to get the royal family into this story. I mean, it's part of their DNA. It's part of the job description if you work at the Telegraph. Every story has to contain a reference to the royal family. Although I do think this point is germane, that the Prince and Princess of Wales, 3 children, Beatrice and Eugenie's children, and even Prince Edward's son, who's 16, would be encompassed in this new plan. But to me, it's kind of like cloud cuckoo land. I don't think people in their right mind will think this is the answer to the nation's problems. This is what's going to stop young people being disillusioned and losing themselves in a bizarre online world which creates all sort of vile fantasies. It's not, the answer is not to send them to the army, it's to engage them with society and with the world, and this really is not the answer.
And Kate, we had James Cleverly also on this morning saying that those that didn't want to do the national service, they wouldn't be jailed, but the Mirror is suggesting that, having sight of leaked documents, saying that those who didn't comply would be jailed.
Yes, the Mirror is reporting, as I think a few other publications have, that they have seen some kind of document suggesting that jail time could be an option for those who wouldn't comply. James Cleverly and the Prime Minister have come out and said that that would not be the case. So we don't know at what phase perhaps a draft document was seen. It has been confirmed by the Prime Minister that that would not be a part of the plan. What's interesting, though, looking at the Telegraph and the Mirror, is the extent to which you could really compel people to do this, because there's now also talk on the front page of the Telegraph. It says one option has been suggested, that the introduction of a fast-track route into graduate schemes or the civil service could be offered for those who have taken part, as if they are already acknowledging that perhaps people won't do this scheme, and if there is no real punishment connected to it, by the way, I don't think there should be, but, you know, how do you actually compel and comply people to do this if you're not going to punish them in some way? Now it seems like they're offering the carrot, not the stick. One has to ask how much this was thought through. And it's just another point about what is ultimately a surprise general election. You know, were people prepared really to put out these policies in May rather than, say, October?
Let's just quickly have a look at the eye, if we may. James, Labour, on the Labour front, promising to rebuild Britain, but will rely on private finance.
Well, I think this is very interesting because one of the really big challenges for Labour is trying to convince people that they're competent on the economy. I think Rachel Reeves has done a good job. She's done a sort of Gordon Brown-style prawn cocktail offensive in the city, trying to schmooze business, convince them that they can be trusted with the economy. And as James Carvell famously said to Bill Clinton, it's the economy, stupid. It's always about the economy. She's also been very reassuring in the conservatism with a small c of her plans, and I believe Mark Carney recently praised her plans for their caution. And there's no wild spending plans, there's no Corbyn-esque, you know, we're going to renationalise everything immediately, we're going to, you know, give everyone tons of money. There's no magic money tree, as Reeves is suggesting. What might cause controversy is the suggestion that she may be introducing private finance initiatives, which under Tony Blair were very controversial, and as the eye says here, left the public sector with debts and constraints decades later. So for some on the left of the party, that might prove a problem. But I do think she's done a very good job of convincing people that, you know, I'm a safe pair of hands, you don't need to worry about the economy. I mean, if you worry about the economy, think of Liz Truss, who took 49 days to double all our mortgages. That's economic incompetence to me.
James and Kate, we're going to leave it there just because of timing issues and take a break. Much more to come from both of you. After the break, we're discussing this on the front of The Times. Its headline, Day Trips on Prescription for Lonely Pupils. Stay with us for more on that and other stories.
ETA is the electronic travel authorisation scheme that the UK has already introduced for people coming from Gulf countries, shortly going to introduce it for the rest of the world other than the EU, and then to EU countries. You're going to have to fill in information before you come, so we get more information about those passengers who didn't need a visa in the first place. So that's what it is. It's going to cost 10 quid, and it's going to last you for 2 years. Then you have to fill it in again.
OK, so can you fill it in before you get to the airport?
Well, the problem is, as it gradually develops, we're going to need more and more information on it, but the answer is yes, you can at the moment. But if you look at what the EU is doing, they're introducing similar schemes, but are immediately going to require fingerprints. So imagine what's going to happen if they all come in at the same time, which they're likely to do. You're going to have real problems at the borders where we have both the EU and the UK borders at the same time. So real potential for chaos. We're doing it because we want to get more information about people who come into the UK. It's for security reasons. But there are real concerns about whether or not we've got the opportunity to get much security information at this stage. Following Brexit, we've lost immediate real-time access to a major European database that would have been so helpful to us. So there needs to be negotiations to improve data. And there are lots of other issues. So, for example, if you are a passenger travelling via Heathrow, just stopping off to carry on, you're a transit passenger, you're going to be required to have an ETA, and that's about 10 million people. So Heathrow are really concerned that a lot of people are going to say, why bother stopping in London when we have to fill in all these forms, pay 10 quid, family of 4, 40 quid and so on. They'll find another hub airport. So lots of concerns about it. The concern that the committee has is that we simply haven't got all the details sorted out, and we haven't even done a deal with the EU to make sure that their scheme and our scheme don't take place at the same time. And it's all going to happen at a time when the government have sacked the independent inspector of Customs and Borders and haven't replaced him. And so the person who would independently view what was going on currently doesn't exist.
Welcome back. Just want to update some breaking news that we brought you a short time ago. The Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry had put out a figure of 50 dead following an IDF airstrike in Rafah. They have now revised that down to 35. So the number killed in that airstrike is 35, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. OK, well, let's continue with our press preview. With me, the columnist for The Independent, James Rampton, and economics editor for The Spectator, Kate Andrews. Let's have a look at the Telegraph front page. And this story suggesting that Labour, or certainly Sir Keir Starmer, doesn't believe that the British public trusts the Labour Party. James?
Yeah, I think this is very interesting. It sort of follows on from what we were saying before the break. They've got to convince people that their money will be safe in Labour's hands. Also, our security will be safe in their hands. And I like the fact that Starmer is admitting that to some people he's still a bit of an unknown quantity. I remember he said a couple of weeks ago to his team, we have to campaign like we're 5% behind, not 20% ahead. He needs to be a bit of a street fighter. And also there are terrible examples of Labour hubris in the past. I mean, everyone remembers, people as old as I am, remember the Neil Kinnock rally in Sheffield in 1992 when he was whooping jubilantly 2 days before the election about how he was going to chuck out John Major. And guess what? John Major won the election. So there's a very great danger of complacency because the polls are so favourable to Labour. And I think he's very canny here to say, you know, he's harping on about aspects that are normally Tory strong points like security, the economy. He's saying, I will fight for you, which is a kind of almost patriotic rallying cry. If people do doubt the Labour Party traditionally, it's that it's not patriotic enough, it's not backing defence, it's not backing this country.
Let's bring Kate in on that.
Making that point.
Definitely not being complacent at all and bringing up security, saying that it will act fast to win the trust on security. That's on the Times front page.
Yes, on the front page of the Times, he's pledging what he's calling a security sprint. In the first 100 days, there'll be a review of all threats facing the UK. It's being compared by the Shadow Home Secretary to what the UK did after 9/11. And I think these two stories are very much connected. This is a Labour Party that doesn't just want to convince you about that big question that always faces Labour, is the economy specifically, and is your money going to be safe in their hands? But he wants to show that very big difference between himself and Jeremy Corbyn, because security was one of the #1 issues when Jeremy Corbyn was leading the Labour Party, especially going into an election. It is not at all surprising that he's decided to focus in that area. But let's also remember that this is very tactical for Keir Starmer. He does not want people sitting around for the next couple of weeks thinking to themselves, well, actually, I could maybe vote for another party. I could vote for a smaller party. I could vote for anybody I want because Labour is so safe.
Yeah.
He wants to craft a narrative that this is not a done deal because on polling day, he wants as many people showing up to vote for the Labour Party as he can get.
Gets people out to vote, doesn't it? Let's quickly look at the other story on the front page of the Times, James. And this is about prescribing trips out and various other interventions to help children who are feeling lonely.
Yeah, at first we thought there was maybe a bit of a downbeat story, but reading into it, it's actually a very hopeful idea. Social prescribing, as it's called, has already been used to help adults who are in mental health difficulties. The GP suggests that they might join a rambling club or a community group. Now it's being applied to children, inviting them to go fishing or to make trips to museums to try and alleviate the real problem of young people's loneliness. The ONS said that 20% of children aged 10 to 15 living in the city reported feeling lonely in 2018. That's a heck of a lot. 1 in 5 children. Yes, we talked earlier about the sort of online world that children can get lost in. It's very isolating. So anything that can alleviate that, I think, is really to be applauded.
Kate, good idea?
Look, I think it's very interesting that what they're prescribing is real social connection. To your point about being online all the time, that's definitely having an impact. Also, those figures you just cited from 2018, they estimate have risen post-pandemic when kids weren't legally allowed to see their friends and spend time together. It's so sad we're talking about such small children, really, and the lack of social interaction that they've got to have over the past 5 years has definitely, well, it's been in decline. So not at all surprising they're encouraging them to get out and meet other people.
Indeed. Kate Kate and James, thank you very much for taking us through the papers. See you in the next hour. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, at least 35 people reported killed in an Israeli airstrike on Rafah in Gaza.